The ledge had never failed. For years, longer than the Ibex could measure, this narrow line of stone had been part of the mountain's internal map. It was not wide, not generous, but it was reliable. A place where hooves fit exactly, where weight transferred cleanly, where balance required attention but not doubt. The Ibex climbed toward it with the same economy it always used. Its body was lean and powerful, built for vertical space. Muscles along the shoulders and haunches moved in coordinated restraint, not force. Each step was placed deliberately, hooves finding purchase on angles too steep for most animals to consider. Wind slid along the cliff face, cold and dry, carrying no threat. The rock was pale limestone, fractured but familiar, streaked with old mineral stains and lichen worn thin by decades of passing bodies. The Ibex reached the ledge and slowed. This pause was habitual, not fear, confirmation. The animal lowered its head slightly, eyes aligning with the rock ahead, checking spacing, distance, texture. Nothing looked different. The ledge curved gently around the face, just wide enough for a single line of travel. The Ibex stepped forward. The front hoof landed exactly where it always had. For a fraction of a second, everything was normal. Then the stone shifted. Not dramatically, not with a crack that echoed or a collapse that announced itself. Just a subtle change, a sinking sensation where there should have been resistance, a softness that stone was not supposed to have. The hoof slid. The Ibex reacted instantly, muscles tightening, weight shifting backward to compensate. The second hoof pressed down harder, seeking the familiar firmness that should have been there. It was gone. A thin layer of rock sheared away beneath the weight, breaking loose along an old fracture line hidden beneath dust and lichen. Pebbles spilled downward, bouncing silently at first, then clattering as they fell. The Ibex froze mid-motion. Stillness returned, but it was a different kind. Tense, compressed, full of held energy. The animal's body flattened closer to the cliff, center of gravity pulled inward. Hooves adjusted by millimeters, testing what remained. The ledge was narrower now, not gone, but changed. Below, the mountain dropped away sharply. The fall was not imagined. It was measured, familiar, absolute. The Ibex did not look down. It did not need to. Its focus remained on the rock in front of it. The stone had failed quietly. There had been no warning in the surface texture, no visible crack wide enough to read. Freeze and thaw had worked slowly behind the scenes, water expanding in fractures, loosening bonds one grain at a time. The ledge had looked the same. It was not the same. The Ibex shifted its weight again, testing the remaining stone with controlled pressure. This time, the rock held, barely. Enough to stand, not enough to trust. The animal's breathing was steady but deeper now, not from panic, but from readiness. Muscles stayed engaged, ready to spring, to cling, to correct instantly if the mountain moved again. The familiar route had changed in one step. What had once been a passage had become a question. The Ibex stood there, balanced between memory and reality, understanding something without thought, that the mountain did not fail all at once, and that danger did not always arrive as collapse. Sometimes it arrived as the smallest loss of resistance, just enough to turn certainty into calculation and a path into something that had to be relearned from the very next step onward. The Ibex did not retreat. Retreat on a ledge like this was not a simple reversal. Turning around required space the mountain did not offer. It required trust in footing that had already betrayed it once. Instead, the Ibex stayed where it was, body angled inward, weight distributed across 3 points of contact, while the fourth searched for information. Information mattered now more than movement. The Ibex lifted its front hoof slowly, not pulling away abruptly, but easing pressure off the weakened section. Tiny fragments of stone slid free as the hoof rose, ticking softly against the cliff before disappearing into open air. The sound did not echo. It did not need to. The ledge felt different. Where it had once been crisp and decisive underhoof, it now felt granular, uncertain. A thin crust of surface rock masked weakness beneath. The Ibex understood this through sensation alone, through vibration, through the way pressure returned unevenly. It shifted its rear hooves slightly, widening stance by a few centimeters. This lowered its center of gravity and reduced load on the damaged section. Muscles along the spine tightened, not to move, but to stabilize. The Ibex waited. Waiting here was not hesitation. It was recalculation. The animal's body ran through options without conscious choice. Forward, backward, upward, downward, weighing each against gravity, friction, and the integrity of stone. Forward meant committing weight to a ledge that no longer held uniformly. Backward meant stepping onto stone that might be equally compromised. Upward meant reaching for holds that were less familiar, steeper, but possibly intact. Downward was not an option. The Ibex tested upward. One horn brushed lightly against the rock as it tilted its head, gauging clearance. The animal extended a front hoof higher, tapping gently at a narrow seam where the cliff face folded inward slightly. The stone there felt cooler, denser. It had not been exposed to the same cycles of weathering. The hoof pressed, released, pressed again. It held. The Ibex transferred a small amount of weight upward, just enough to confirm resistance. The ledge beneath shifted again, not collapsing, but reminding the animal that it could not be relied on further. The decision was made, not in haste, not in fear, in alignment with physics. The Ibex leaned upward, muscles flowing into a controlled lift. The rear hooves pushed lightly, not explosively, avoiding shock that could trigger further breakage. The body rose, close to the cliff, minimizing outward pull. For a brief moment, the Ibex was between supports. Then the upper hold took its weight. The animal froze again, letting the stone accept the load gradually. Nothing moved. No sound followed. The mountain held. Only then did the Ibex allow its breathing to slow slightly. Below, the ledge it had trusted for so long lay diminished. Still there, still passable perhaps, but no longer part of a safe sequence. The Ibex did not look at it again. Attention shifted entirely to what came next. The route was no longer familiar, it was now being written step by step. The Ibex continued upward carefully, abandoning the old line in favor of a steeper, less travelled face. Each movement was slower than before, more deliberate. The mountain demanded proof now, not memory. As the Ibex climbed, small stones loosened and fell occasionally, harmless but instructive. The cliff was not collapsing. It was adjusting, shedding what it could no longer support. The Ibex adjusted with it. The ledge had given way, but not completely. It had given way just enough to erase assumption. And in that erasure, the Ibex had shifted from habit to attention, from repetition to presence. On this mountain, that shift meant the difference between falling and continuing, and as the Ibex climbed higher, leaving the weakened ledge behind without ceremony, it carried forward not the route it had always known, but the quiet discipline of moving as if every step were new, even on stone it had trusted all its life. Above the broken ledge, the mountain changed character. Not dramatically, there was no sudden wall, no sheer face announcing danger, but subtly, in the way surfaces angled and fractures arranged themselves. This section had not been walked as often. Stone edges were sharper, dust thinner, lichen less worn. The rock did not carry the memory of passage. The Ibex moved into it cautiously. Its body stayed close to the cliff, horns angled to avoid catching, shoulders rolling smoothly as weight transferred upward. Every step now was provisional. The animal no longer assumed sequence, it confirmed it. A rear hoof slipped slightly on a smooth patch of limestone. The movement was small, almost invisible, but the Ibex felt it immediately. Muscles corrected before the slip could become momentum. The hoof reset, pressing harder, finding a rougher grain beneath the surface polish. The mountain was teaching again. The Ibex paused, head tilted, ears forward, listening not for sound, but for vibration, for the subtle feedback that stone gave when it accepted weight cleanly. Silence meant stability. A faint crumble meant warning. It advanced another step. This route demanded more vertical reach. The ibex stretched upward farther than before, forelegs extending, chest brushing rock. Strength mattered here, but only when paired with precision. A strong push in the wrong place would break what little margin existed. The ibex climbed diagonally now, not straight up, following a line of intersecting fractures that distributed load across multiple points. This was slower, but it reduced reliance on any single hold. Below, a stone loosened and fell. It dropped out of sight quickly, its path marked only by a brief dry rattle as it struck lower ledges. The ibex did not flinch. Falling stone was information, not threat, confirmation that the mountain was shedding weak pieces under minimal stress. The ibex responded by shifting slightly higher, choosing holds that felt colder, deeper, less exposed to surface decay. These stones had endured longer. They returned pressure cleanly. Breathing deepened again, not from fear, but from sustained effort. Muscles along the forequarters worked continuously now, holding position while the hind legs repositioned carefully. This was not the flowing climb of familiar terrain. This was deliberate ascent. The ibex stopped beneath a narrow overhang, using it briefly as shelter from wind. Here, the rock face curved inward, offering protection but also limiting movement. The animal stood still, letting its body settle, conserving strength before the next sequence. From this height, the broken ledge below was no longer visible. That mattered. The ibex was no longer navigating away from failure. It was navigating toward continuation. Above, the cliff angled back slightly, promising a return to easier ground, not safety, but margin. The ibex studied the approach carefully, mapping a route through holds that looked intact but were still untested. One step at a time, it moved. Each successful placement rebuilt confidence, not the blind confidence of repetition, but the earned confidence of proof. The mountain did not oppose the ibex now. It responded neutrally, holding when asked correctly. The ledge had not been an isolated flaw. It had been a signal, a reminder that the mountain did not preserve paths out of loyalty and that familiarity was not protection against change. What endured was not the route, but the ability to abandon it without delay. As the ibex climbed into ground that felt firmer again, it carried forward a new pattern of movement. Slower, quieter, more exacting. The stone had given way, so the ibex had given up certainty, and in doing so, it had not lost the mountain. It had relearned how to move within it, one careful step at a time, in a place where repetition no longer guaranteed safety, but attention still did. The slope eased gradually, almost without announcement. The ibex felt it first through posture, the angle of its spine lowering, the need to pull inward less urgent, the way weight began to settle downward instead of outward. The cliff face did not disappear, but it softened into broken steps and shallow terraces where stone met stone with more generosity. Here, the mountain felt older, not weaker, older in the sense of having already lost what could not hold. The rock was rougher, fractured in wide, stable blocks rather than thin skins. Frost had taken what it wanted long ago. What remained had learned how to stay. The ibex stepped onto a broader shelf and stopped. For the first time since the ledge failed, it allowed its body to rest fully. All four hooves planted, muscles released in stages, tension draining slowly rather than all at once. Breathing deepened, then steadied. Below, nothing moved. No falling stone, no shifting grit, no delayed collapse. The mountain held. The ibex turned its head slightly and looked back along the line it had climbed. The broken ledge was far below now, invisible from this height, absorbed into the cliff's long vertical memory. It was not marked. It would not be remembered by the mountain, but the ibex remembered. Not as fear, as calibration. It scanned the terrain ahead. From here, the route rejoined a network of slopes and ridges that the ibex knew well. Wind-carved paths, angled shelves, places where generations had moved with confidence. The danger was not gone, but it had returned to a familiar language. The ibex began to move again. Its gait was smoother now, but not careless. The change in terrain did not erase what had been learned. Each step still carried confirmation before commitment. Each hoof pressed, waited, then accepted weight. The mountain did not demand urgency. The ibex climbed higher, cresting the slope and stepping onto a sunlit ridge where wind swept clean the stone and snow lay thin and crisp. From here, the land opened outward, valleys below, peaks rising beyond, the long geometry of altitude reasserting itself. The ibex paused at the ridge and stood tall. This was not triumph. There was no display, no release of sound, just presence, an animal occupying space it had earned through attention rather than force. The ledge had failed, but the mountain had not turned hostile. It had simply reminded the ibex of something fundamental, that roots were temporary agreements, not promises, that stone endured by changing, and that survival here belonged not to those who remembered the mountain best, but to those who continued to read it accurately when memory stopped matching reality. The ibex turned and continued along the ridge, moving with quiet precision into terrain that once again allowed rhythm, not the old rhythm, but a refined one. Below, the broken ledge remained part of the cliff, indistinguishable from countless other scars left by weather and time. Above, the path forward waited, not fixed, not guaranteed, but solid enough when approached without assumption. And as the ibex disappeared along the high ground, the lesson of the day stayed with it in muscle and balance rather than thought. That the mountain never truly gave way all at once. It only asked again and again whether each step was being placed with care.